This is meeting number 117 of the International Trade Committee pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, February 6. The committee is resuming its study on CBSA Assessment and Revenue Management System, CARM as we all refer it to. We have with us today from the Canada Border Services Agency, Ten Gallivan, Executive Vice President, and Mike Leahy, Director General, Commercial Projects. Apologies for starting late, but you understand how that is. Welcome to. Now we're going to, if the agreement with the committee that will, given the time constraints, that we have the written submissions from the two witnesses, and that will go straight into the questions from the members. And we'll start with Mr. Baldinelli for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. Mr. Gallivan, last March the committee heard that CBSA is approved to spend up to $26 million on CARM. About $438 million had already been allocated and spent to date. Of that, you said about $182 million had gone to Deloitte Canada. Are these numbers still accurate at this point in time?
The numbers at that point in time remain accurate. Obviously, time has passed, and so the numbers would have increased proportionately, but I can confirm to the committee that we remain under the envelope of $526 million.
Do you know what that number is at this point in time?
We recently updated figures up till December 2023, and we are in the process of bridging the remaining 9 months, and we'll be updating that similarly to our website as soon as our CFO has a chance to validate them.
It's kind of disappointing, Madam Chair, that we're here today. I mean, Deloitte had been provided with $182 million by the Government of Canada, and it would have been, I think, beneficial for them to be here. For one, because I would like for them to have been here to hear CBSA testimony, because in March when we had met, there seemed to be some discrepancy over the ownership of the portal. On March 19th at this committee, my colleague Kyle Seebeck asked you directly, so the Government of Canada is going to own this IT solution. And your response is, we too have been investigating the question of what aspects of IT people own. And then you further state, we have asked lawyers who are experts in IP to give us advice. Mr. Gallivan, would it have not been prudent on behalf of taxpayers to do that work before concluding a contractual relationship, to determine ownership before signing the contract?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I think there's two parts to the intellectual property. First, will Canadians continue to get value from the funds they've invested? And I think the answer has always been clear in relation to the CBSA being able to use the intellectual property created through these investments. And Deloitte confirmed that in testimony at this committee, saying that the contract does allow for a transfer of all of the functionality back to the CBSA. The more esoteric question, Madam Chair, quickly, was could Deloitte resell this intellectual property to another government? I think I used Argentina as an example. That was the question that required the intervention of lawyers, and that was a question that had been raised in the process of consultation. And so I think there's never been a question of the Government of Canada getting value for its investment. There was a question of whether or not Deloitte could, if somebody was interested, resell this product to another government.
So in essence, you're comfortable with the fact that the government has spent $500 million and it doesn't own the portal?
Madam Chair, that wasn't my testimony, nor was it the testimony of Deloitte. Deloitte has been very clear that should the CBSA exit the contract for any reason, they will transfer back the intellectual property, the programs, to the CBSA.
Well, if you look at the contract, Section 1.7 says ownership of intellectual property for contractor furnished solution. Canada acknowledges that intellectual property ownership of the contractor funded software incorporated into CARM Phase 2 solution belongs to the contractor or its licensor and is not transferred to the government under contract. So Deloitte owns the IP.
Again, Madam Chair, if we're talking about IP in relation to the ability of the Government of Canada to have a portal serving Canadian businesses, the answer is we own that aspect of the IP and can continue to provide the excellent services of CARM in perpetuity if we walk away from the Deloitte contract.
So do you mean that under Section 0.14, or that says the contractor grants to Canada the right to access and use the solution? They've created it, but they're giving you the right to use it, and you're paying $500 million for that right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was Deloitte's testimony before this committee, that the government has bought...
Contract. That's the actual contract.
The CBSA's testimony and Deloitte's testimony has been clear. The $500 million investment of Canadian taxpayers is secure. We can continue to own and operate that system. Deloitte testified to that in front of the committee. The clause that is being referred to relates to Deloitte's ability to resell the intellectual property to other potential clients.
Mr. Gallivan, okay, in your testimony in March, you had spoken about the first delay that was implemented, and you had mentioned that it was done so at the request of stakeholders, and so that request was in the fall retail season, and that of 2023, and CBSA had agreed to do that. Well, Mr. Gallivan, we're in the fall again, and if stakeholders are still asking and stating that there are concerns with this portal, would you not agree that it should be delayed again as we head into the holiday season? I mean, for the same reasons? Don't think...
Allow Mr. Gallivan to answer.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I've yet to hear of any stakeholder asking for further delay because of the holiday retail season in 2024.
5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks to our witnesses for being here. We've heard from a variety of stakeholders, including CBSA, on the CARM launch. I wanted to kind of follow up on the conversations that we had a few months ago in terms of readiness and importers and custom brokers being ready for this. Where are we at? Are we seeing more of an uptick in terms of importers now registered? I know by volume we had a big increase back then, but do we have more importers now on board?
Chair, start with the CBSA has been using CARM since May 2024, and so that aspect of the launch has been quite successful. Maybe we'll come to that later. This committee heard that only 1% of client software usage had been certified in the spring. I'm happy to say that we have 24 different software products certified to interact between the private sector and CARM. That represents 99% of all commercial imports in Canada. So that was the metric that was appended to a letter of representation this committee received. And I would say today, as we sit here, 99% of commercial imports have software ready to interact. In terms of registration, if you'd like, or would you like a follow-up question? I could talk about registration. In relation to registration, it's 94% of the top 3,000 importers are registered. And then of micro business, 60% of micro business are already registered. And we have additional measures in place to get additional micro businesses over the line. And so in terms of software certification or business registration, we're largely there. We've also published 6 customs notices after consultation with stakeholders.
The 40% of businesses, micro businesses that are left to come on board, and what steps are you taking to get them on board?
First point on that, working with the CFIB through webinars, having person on site, et cetera, to help get them in the door. They're largely cash importers anyway. So they come into the customs office, they provide a check. And so the portal, they're not dependent on the portal, and they're not portal users today. Second, because they do tend to come in and interact with our border officers, we have our ports of entry set up to register people on arrival. Should that not work, we also have the ability to allow them to do their importation without registering. And so we have the ability to allow people to do their importation without having a business number.
And we heard some reservations in terms of the duties and tax calculation on CBS's side, saying it was not as perfect as it could be a few months ago. Where are we at those calculations now?
Madam Chair, we have the benefit of having been using this tool over the summer. And so I would say there's 2 parts to the calculation. There's the math and the accuracy. On the math, we've run 2,000 transactions that went through legacy system and through CARM 2.0. And of the 2,000 transactions or submissions that we ran through, only 2 had a discrepancy. And so in terms of a mathematical calculation, they're identical. Now, in terms of interpretation of the Excise Tax Act and the Customs Act, we're finding significant discrepancies. Our estimates show that in the range of $200 million in discrepancies will be identified by CARM each year. And we have a detailed list of recurring errors that are being made. We've already launched dozens of compliance campaigns where we're contacting businesses and alerting them to these interpretive errors. And so I would say that the concerns around calculations fall into two camps: legislative interpretation of the correct coding and treatment of the acts, and the math. Our experience over the summer shows the math is identical between CARM 2.0 and Legacy, but CARM does have better analytics to flag compliance issues.
And we heard about ticketing issues, contacting CBSA's help desk if a retailer or an importer had some issues. The response time wasn't as quick as we'd hope. Where are we at in terms of response times when someone raises an issue with duties or taxes or calculations?
Madam Chair, this goes back to the
Madame la Présidente, tout revient à la question de l'inscription. Nous avons inscrit 35 000 personnes au cours des derniers mois et nous avons une augmentation de 5 % du volume d'appels. Donc, je crois que les gens ont été frustrés par le délai de réponse. Nous avons créé un service d'urgence qui répond en 4 heures parce que nous ne voulions pas entraver le commerce dans ce pays. Et en fait, les questions qui ont été présentées ont trouvé une réponse dans ce délai de 4 heures parce que nous ne voulons pas que des fruits pourrissent à la frontière, par exemple. Donc, nous disons que le système peut être réparé. Il y a eu beaucoup d'activités parce que les gens ont laissé leur inscription à la dernière minute. La semaine dernière, il y a des gens qui ont demandé ce service dans un délai de 4 heures, l'ont obtenu dans 80 % des cas. Monsieur Barsalou-Duval.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. The 19th and 21st of March, last March, a motion was tabled for a list of documents. Following this, some documents were received, but not necessarily through CBSA, but through another company. So I would like to know of the documents that were submitted through the company, has there been coordination between you two on the topic of what was sent? I wouldn't say that there was coordination. The CBSA received 9 ATIPs and 3 requests for information. That's 37,000 pages of documents. We responded to 7 out of 9 directly. There are 31,000 technical documents that are not done yet. 100% of the required documents have been submitted to the Translation Bureau, and all of these documents will be made available soon, and they will be given to the committee. So in terms of what has been delivered thus far, we've received a lot of documents, so sometimes it's hard to keep up with what we have received. So firstly, the deliverable on the functional technical details and all the comments submitted by CBSA concerning the specifications. Madam Chair, I don't think that I can answer this question. For each draft, in April, when we delivered the requested documents, we opened the door to the most high priority documents. So we have to prioritize these documents. We can submit this to the committee in written form. We know that it can take some time to receive the requested information is because we're dealing with a high volume of documents, but we are prioritizing the mentioned documents. So these documents were not on the list, if I understood correctly, the submitted list. I think that Mr. Lee could confirm, maybe? I don't know if it was sent, but it is in the list, yes. And we put it on the top of the list. I'm assuming that it's the same thing for all the deliverables for the functional and technical details of this system. So, Madam Chair, from the beginning, we have requested that these be prioritized, and we are happy to prioritize documents in accordance with the committee's requests. As mentioned, all documents are already with the Translation Bureau, and we can put them on the top of the pile, as my colleague mentioned. Okay? On another topic that I'd like to get into, there are other documents here. Firstly, the ones that shows which work has been raised by CBSA, given the current circumstances. So we received information on needs that have not been met, but there's no reference to the statement of work. So I don't think it's the complete list. We have several third-party reports that should offer a lot of information on the Canadians' needs in turn, and also for the internal audit. So if this document was not submitted to the committee yet, I think it's because it was produced by an independent group, a third party. I think that would be the best document to answer your questions. And lastly, the internal report, the most recent simulation test. So that's from the spring. We also received a document on this, but I don't think it included participants' comments. Have you brought together all the comments from participants somewhere? I think that with these numbers, we're coming back to the question we answered earlier. So we did this simulation. The private sector shared some concerns. In many cases, it was a deliberate decision to reject certain calculations or submissions. And so there's a difference in opinion between CBSA that enforces the law and these private companies. And I think that's because they can go back to the Auditor General report that stated that there was a 20% general rate. There's not a lot of time left. Actually, we're out of time, sorry. So it would have been interesting to see the participants' comments. Thank you.
Mr. Cannings for 5 minutes, please.
Monsieur Cannings, vous avez 5 minutes. Merci.
I just wanted to go to these differences, I guess, in opinion. You might want to say what CARM says and what the importers, exporters are saying. And I'm assuming you feel that CARM is always right, or is, how are these differences of opinion dealt with at the moment and over the course of time, and how does that affect the numbers that you report in terms of savings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the question. I'll use a couple of quick examples and deal into one. The first is a large retailer may import flowers and trees and code them as groceries. And just because those things are sold in a grocery store doesn't make them sales tax exempt because they're in the grocery store. A second example might be marshmallows. Marshmallows are basic groceries. You might think they're exempt from GST, or as a snack, are they subject to GST? And there's actually details around the chemical ingredients that'll decide that. Our approach has been consultative and educational. And so we have been reaching out to the businesses where we flag those discrepancies and telling them what we think is wrong. And we've been open to dialogue. And in the examples I gave you, there has been a dialogue. And in the marshmallow case, representation the other way. And so our plan is to nudge businesses into what we believe is to be compliance with open ears to feedback from the private sector. We're not trying to tie up or gum up the Canada's trade. But we are trying to move people into compliance. And so we have something called the culpability framework. And I guess the root of my question is we're leading with education and asking questions as opposed to issuing bills.
And reading your notes here, it sounds like that you used data from the last 2 years to come up with these calculations. So you were comparing a before and after scenario. So
talk about the 200 million in discrepancies that we're identifying. We used a 31-month period to say the annual range of discrepancies would be 200 million. Look, some of those would have been self-corrected. Businesses would have figured it out, or their accountant or somebody might have figured it out. We might have figured it out through audit. But I think getting it right from the start is important, and it's important for there to be a level playing field between Canadian businesses and between Canadian businesses and international competitors. And so, by having an automated tool, our sense is people are going to get it right from the start.
And just again to clarify, is most of the discrepancy or all the discrepancies related to GST situations, or is it tariffs, or what's the main cause of those discrepancies?
Certainly the 200 million in GST was the most obvious, and it's the biggest number. But, a policy choice on something like ball gowns and dresses, where there's an 18% lift applied, the analytics from CARM are letting us figure out that some businesses aren't paying that. And so I would say no. CARM is also identifying people maybe abusing most favored trade nations. The government of Canada, this parliament makes choices about which country get or don't get most favored trade nation status. And we're finding examples of people, mistakenly or otherwise, coding goods as coming from a most favored trade nation when in fact they're not.
And so these savings are happening under CARM because before it was a lot laxer, or I guess I'm puzzled why there was so much missed before.
So a few things. CARM does provide an enhanced data set, so we have additional line of sight, but it also digitizes the information and passes that to our compliance folks more quickly. And so we're working off paper. We're weaning ourselves off paper. We are asking for a broader data set, and that's feeding our analytics because it's a digitized record.
Remaining.
And just quickly, and what are the concerns you're hearing? Because when I talk to business groups in general, they're very concerned about this. So, what are you hearing of their concerns, and what do you look to the future for in the immediate future?
Well, I think one of the biggest concerns for our own employees and business groups is that CARM is not a cross. Like, a cross is the system that manages actual traffic real time at the border. That's not CARM, and we're not touching the system that does that. And the second is CARM 2.0 isn't one and done. People think that we're done, and it's not the case. We're going to have 2 updates a year indefinitely. And so I think those are the 2 biggest issues that if you can talk to people to say, this isn't the system we use to clear goods at the border, it's the back-end accounting system. It takes down the temperature. And then telling people when we go live on October 21st, it's the start, not the end. It takes down the temperature.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martel for 4 minutes. We're going to try to do one more round. We do have several witnesses in the waiting room for the next panel. So, but let's try and do another round. 4 minutes.
Okay, merci, Madame Chair.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gallivan, how are they making up for the lack of trust that this could cause with trade partners? And what do you think about the frustration with the reliability of the system, or lack thereof? There are a lot of stakeholders in the private sector that are really excited about this new tool. There are companies that we have shared publicly on our website that support this tool. And so many people are looking forward to increased transparency and having easier access to their own data. Secondly, as I mentioned, that the Auditor General said that there's a 20% error rate. They've asked us to remove the licenses of certain brokers because of this. And so, of course, certain customs brokers are concerned if they're part of that group of 20% that are making these errors. So if the person is not paying the necessary duties, then of course they should be concerned. So administrative and economic issues related to what will be the consequences of errors in the system. So firstly, for Canadian companies, they will have transparent access to all that they're doing on CARM, just the way they have access to their bank account. So it'll increase transparency for the entire industry. Secondly, to go back to the question of observation. When there is a mistake, it will be stopped from the beginning. It's not going to be hours later. So the error will be automatically sent into the system, and we won't have to go back and ask them to recalculate it. So we think that this is a tool that's going to make work easier for companies. And this electronic tool will also allow small companies to no longer have to go into the physical customs agency, and they're going to be able to input their data online so they have less administrative burden. What will be the main risks that CBSA is preparing for the October launch? Great question. One risk is that things are too tight because there are a lot of different elements in this big machine. So there may be some submissions that are rejected. We've been working with the system over the summer now. About 1% of transactions are rejected. So what concerns me is the risk that there's 50% of transactions that will be of a punitive nature for the private sector. Can you guarantee that there will be $40 billion in gains in profit for Canada because of this system? So the $40 billion is the global amount, the overall amount. So I know that this amount will be increasing for us overall. We have staff on the ground, and we have a contract with Deloitte. That means that if there is an issue, they will deal with the issue, and this will not be taxpayers paying for this. So we will be able to manage any problem that might come up. Mr. Martel, sorry, 7 seconds.
Please, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. And since the last time, is there any big fine or updates that you have experienced over the summer working with stakeholders to implement CARM? Because as we know, October 4th date is coming. How ready is CARM for the importers?
Yeah, so I already talked a bit about the compliance approach where we're seeing early success, which makes us comfortable that there'll be a revenue lift. I mentioned 99% of Canada's commercial trade has software certified that's compatible with CARM. I mentioned the number of people that are registered. 8,000 of our own employees are now equipped with access to CARM. And so I think we've largely de-risked it as much as we can ahead of the October 21st launch date. Maybe turn to Mr. Leahy for some specifics.
You mentioned certification. Like, we were here in the spring and the certification numbers were not strong. And there's been a lot of dedicated outreach between ourselves, Shared Services Canada, and industry to spend time together to say, let's get through this process. So there are 30 digital tests they have to go through, and we went through them. We spent enough time, and there was enough commitment. There are 4 companies left, and we're expecting them to be done by October 21st as well. So it was a real push from many sides.
And you know, I had the chance of being shared with the demo and seeing the CARM by itself. And have you found any significant, I guess, user experience over this past summer through working with the stakeholders and see how the new CARM coming in will be much better than what we have been expecting?
I think for that user community that we're talking about that got access in May, the lights came on. So here's a tool that they haven't had previously. CARM scores information and says, look at this. Somebody may be doing something that you're interested in. And then an officer gets a chance to dig in and say, yeah, that commodity should attract duty at this rate, and look what's happening. Maybe it's not being remitted. Maybe there's something here I should explore further. So it gives decision support to people that have been looking for that kind of support from a tool for years. So that part of our organization really said CARM works.
Sorry to interrupt, but with my limited time, I want to ask, like, how much transaction are you expecting once CARM goes live in October 4th? And if there are any incident or issue with regards to transaction, what kind of response or time rate response or I guess procedure implementation that you can resolve those issues?
That's a good question. And there's been outreach to industry about we are going to, during the cutover process, we're deferring the accounting obligation. And so we're going to accumulate information. And when we start up on the 21st, we're going to process the backlog and then everything net new concurrently. So orchestrating that and having CARM ready to deal with the 16 days worth of volume has been planned. It's been tested, we tested performance, double what we see currently. So if we're looking at 30 million accounting documents, we looked at double the impacts and get ready for that initial spike. But for the solution, it's been planned to deal with what's coming and starting up on the 21st.
And estimate how many transactions per month would be going through CARM?
We're on a monthly basis. We're looking at, well, annually we're looking at 30 million entries. So the breakdown by month or by minute it'll flow based on the month. But I don't have an exact number, as you can tell. But I'll get you one.
Okay. Now I need some comments, some direction from the committee. It's quarter to 6. We have in the waiting room Canadian Association of Importers and Exporters. We have Customs and Immigration Union, Federal Express, and UPS Canada. We would have 45 minutes with these witnesses. I was trying to do another round so that the block would have 2 minutes and Mr. Cannings would have 2 minutes, but then that's going to take us up to 5 to 6. So is it best that we let these witnesses go and bring in our other witnesses that are waiting? Okay?
Si c'est possible, j'aurais pris 2 minutes.
If possible, I would like to take 2 minutes. It would be quick.
For the other, okay, Mr. Canning says he's fine.
Madam Chair.
Moi, je demanderais, mais si le comité préfère.
I would request it, but if the committee would like to move on, that's okay. But personally, I would appreciate the 2 minutes if possible.
Just quickly.
Écoutez, pas plus vite que 2 minutes.
It won't be shorter than 2 minutes, but not longer either. Hello? So I would have liked to have requested an additional document because you said in your script that you did tests with more than 150 partners, and all this since May 2024. So we would like to have more details. Is there a report we could look to? Honestly, I don't know how useful it is. Is there an issue, sir? Am I causing a problem? Yes, that's fine. Okay. But honestly,
Well,
Ça les intéresse pas.
they don't seem to be interested in what I'm saying. So we requested documents in April. You said that it could be sent within 20 days, if I remember correctly. However, it took months and months. We still didn't have everything. And then you said we could prioritize certain documents. I don't know how many thousands of people are working in the department, but when we request something, are we really going to get it in a timely manner this time?
Madame la Présidente, comme
Madam
j'ai
Chair, as I said before, all our responses to the committee had an added line that I wrote personally that said, if it is your priority, we will put it on the top of the pile. So I will take note of this. I'll take note of the members' request, and we will be working on that very quickly. But we had a motion that specifically requested documents. You said that we would be able to have them within 20 days. And there was a series of documents. You stated in a committee that we would be able to have them within the time limit. And that was requested by a motion in the committee, but we did not receive them yet. So we're talking about 37,000 documents that were requested. 100% of those documents are being translated. So that's the holdup. And when did you send these? I do not have the details of this, of when they will be ready, but what I can say is that we are extremely interested in providing these documents in order of priority in both official languages as is necessary. So they need to be translated.
To the witnesses, we will suspend while we bring the other witnesses in quickly. Thank you very much for appearing today, and apologies for the lateness. much. Apologies for the delay. The committee is anxious to start in asking you questions immediately, so if you don't mind that we forego your written comments, but I understand that we have them and they'll be distributed in both official languages to the committee following today's testimony. Okay? So we're on to Mr. Baldinelli, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for being here. I'm going to go to Ms. Campbell first. On April 8, 2024, a written brief signed by 22 trade chain partners was submitted to the committee. It highlighted concerns about inadequate certification, accuracy, single source of truth, no transition plan, no final policy or regulatory detail, and custom self-assessment degrading benefits and functionality. Have these concerns been addressed by CBSA to your satisfaction and to that of the trade chain partners that you represent?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. I can easily just say no. CBSA has actually not consulted with trade since March 27th of 2024. So all of the outstanding issues that we have brought forward during that time remain.
Last March, CBSA testified they have a rollback plan and layers of contingency plans. However, your brief communicated that Team CBSA has confirmed a rollback is not possible. This is a stark contradiction. Has CBSA addressed this concern? I mean, once that blackout period starts, we're into it.
Yes. We can tell you that we have actually not received a contingency plan, which we were also distressed to see that because that was in the minister's comments that were provided to the committee last week.
Sure.
Plan. We have been given some notification about what is going to happen during the cutover period, and I think it's really important to point out it's a 17-day blackout. We're in the year 2024, and I've never heard of a system being blacked out for 17 days. And so we do have some details around the blackout itself, but the standing up is still not clear. I will give them, I will say they did advise us on the Friday that just passed that there will be a conversation with trade on Friday to ask questions about that, but we have not have given that chance to do so yet.
Mr. Weber, the union you represent submitted a scathing report, to say the least, to the committee concerning an overview of CARM, concerns from the front line. It was dated April 18th, 2024. The brief references a lack of consultation, a lack of training, health and safety concerns, design flaws about CARM, that it was not designed with CBSA in mind, and a lot of general concerns. How does the union representing CBSA workers on the front line today feel about CARM?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the question. Confused, worried, I think would best describe the atmosphere amongst our membership. They've received very little training, basic PowerPoint presentations, no ability to test the system, use the system. The interface that our members see as opposed to the traveler are different, and will be at the border expecting to help travelers, not really knowing what it is they're supposed to do. In terms of the concerns and such that we raised, we received an answer to all the questions that we sent back in May. We received an answer yesterday at 4:46 p.m. And we've not had any consultation in between whatsoever. Presumably they found out that we were testifying here, so thought they would take away my ability to say that there's been no consultation. So well played, but really there's been no consultation.
Is you worry that they're going to default to using Deloitte staff to assist with any concerns that are raised instead of using CBSA officials, union workers, and staff that should be trained, and they have not been, to operate this system?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the concern goes deeper than that. I really believe that this should have been developed in-house. I think the expertise is there. I think you needed to talk to the people who use it every day. Those frontline officers have not been consulted at all. It's, again, like we saw with ArriveCan and like we've seen with other apps and ideas that CBSA has had. The people who use it are not consulted, don't have any involvement in the development whatsoever, really.
So spending $500 million, $500 million, would you suggest we've got another ArriveCan and Phoenix pay disaster just waiting to happen?
I certainly hope not. We all lived through ArriveCan. We're still living through Phoenix. They were absolute disasters. I hope this doesn't turn into that. Again, though, our members are worried that it is going to be that because as of now, this is launching in about 4 weeks. We don't really know what we're doing with it. When I got invited to this committee back on Friday, I've spent the last few days speaking to people to try to gain information so I could provide meaningful answers to the questions you have. No one seems to really know how to use the system. And we are going to be the ones on the line expected to help people using the system. So it's very concerning.
Tony, your time is up. Manny?
Well, thanks to our witnesses for taking the time to be here today. We did hear from FedEx and UPS way back in the spring, and I'd like to follow up with Ms. Bilodeau about readiness. How many customers of yours are now on board? I think last time we heard that there weren't that many or many for you to feel confidence. Can I get an update now?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So what I can say is in terms of an update from a UPS perspective, we are now fully certified, which we were not at that point in time. So we've been fully certified on the 30 scenarios, but not a lot has changed, unfortunately, with respect to our commercial importers in terms of their registration. We're still only at about 20% of our customers that have registered in the CARM client portal at this point in time.
Okay. And maybe from FedEx, Ms. Gelbert, can I get an update from you?
You have to unmute yourself, please.
My apologies. Thank you for the question. The situation is similar to, as Ms. Bilodeau stated for UPS, Federal Express is fully EDI certified with the CARM program, but the uptake from the importers is very, very difficult. There are about 55% of our customer base on Canadian importers that are registered, less than 30% of the U.S. importers, and less than 20% of rest of the world importers. So it's very challenging for importers to maneuver the portal and to manage the different roles within the portal. So, and there's been a great deal of outreach in communications and marketing in order to communicate globally with these customers.
What are some of the apprehensions from maybe UPS and FedEx in regards to the CARM launch date? What's hindering your options to sign up more customers? What do you have in mind in terms of the launch date for CARM and the blackout period?
Thank you. I'll comment. My concerns are not with the back end of the CARM process. I think the modernization, it was long overdue as far as the entry processing. It's all of the front end and the complications of the CARM portal. So it's not that we're hesitant to onboard customers, it's customers are hesitant to onboard themselves. Like they spend... we have comments from importers who are saying they have 10 tries in order to get registered on the portal. They can't get the right documentation, issues with global customers. So it's just the challenge of the portal, having security, delegating the broker that makes it complex.
And when issue in terms of duties and calculations from your tests with CBSA or with customers that might be live on CARM, what's the response time like from CBSA when you raise an issue with calculations?
Well, it's only been in test at this point. So there's just other point I'll make about that is the provincial taxes are not calculated by or validated by CBSA. They're calculated by the brokers. So there would be no validation of that number. But the response time and the test scenarios, CBSA have been very supportive in ensuring that everybody is onboarded.
What's the timelines?
1 minute and 20 seconds.
Timelines? Go ahead, Vince.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question to that question. What's the turnaround timelines? What's the expectation from your end, what the turnaround should be in comparison to what the turnaround timelines from CBSA are?
We're experiencing a wide range of turnaround depending on what the issues are going to be. We're going to be, dealing with thousands of transactions and thousands of importers real time. So the 4-hour turnaround time likely will be sufficient if we could get that 100% of the time. I would say our UPS experience has not been aligned with what Mr. Gallivan indicated, that 80% of the time they're responding within 4 hours. We still have several concerns that go several days without response.
So with that said, and with that said, what has your experience been, number one? And second to that, what implications does this have on the margins that you're expecting if it's taken that long, and how volatile that can be with respect to the expectations of what your returns are going to be?
Certainly, it's resulting in additional cost for industry and for business and for importers as well, as we're tying up their time and our time trying to resolve discrepancies. As Ms. Chalbert reported, there's a lot of time that has to be invested just to get onboarded onto the portal, calls to the CBSA helpline. All of that is adding significant expense to not only industry, trade chain partners, but commercial importers, most importantly.
It's beyond it. Mr. Savard-Tremblay, for 5 minutes, please.
Oui, merci. Alors,
Yes, thank you. Hello, thank you for being here with us. I'm happy to see you because it seems that we're looking at the same thing that happened before, yet the officials are telling that everything's going well in the best case scenario. We've had lots of consultations and everything's perfect, no problem. But now we're hearing from many organizations, pretty well all the organizations that are affected by this, that there was no consultation, that no, things are not going well, and no, it's not already. So, Ms. Campbell, firstly, earlier you said that you were not able to participate in consultations or you weren't consulted on a contingency plan. Did you participate in the tests or simulations since your last, since you were a witness here before in the spring and since your note that you submitted?
We have not. Many of our members have, but again, it's a very defined amount of people. We don't disagree with the reflection in terms of who are participating, but remember that's only the certifiers of software. There's still, and there was only 40 companies allowed to even test in the CES. So that means on October to the 21st, that's almost under 200,000 people, importers and service providers that are seeing this, interaction for the first time. Not just the portal. Like I think we get very fixated on the portal from a CBSA perspective, but the vast majority of transactions are going to be going through the EDI processes, and we're all still learning about that. I don't know if I answered your question completely.
Oui, c'est très clair. Et lors de...
In the spring, you said that a lot of processes had to be done manually and it wasn't automated yet. Is that still the case?
Say yes, it is. And even big pieces of it still haven't been tested. We talk about the RPP, for example, the release prior to payment, and every importer is going to have a bond. We're hearing from the sureties, none of that has even started yet. So we don't even have a clue that's all going to work and feel. And we just heard from our courier colleagues, and although Customs is giving us some deferred periods to get ready, they've punted it 6 months, but those things are not even working now. So we're not really sure what's going to happen even in 6 months.
Monsieur Weber, vous...
Mr. Weber, from what I've understood, you were not consulted with either, more than you said in the past. You said that there's pretty well a full consensus that there has not been enough training for CBSA employees on CARM, and that a few days before the implementation of the system, the one that was planned at the time, it was still the case. So what would you say about training today? I would imagine that if it's been pushed back, it's so that things be better now.
The level of training that we have now is pretty much where it was before. Our members really don't know what to expect, what they're going to be doing, how to assist any of the importers who are going to be arriving at the border. When the launch was delayed last time, it was blamed by the CBSA on a strike vote. I mean, I'm trying to be measured in my words, but there's some questions around integrity. That's a federal agency equivalent of the dog ate my homework, to be honest. Our members were furious when they read that. That had no bearing whatsoever on them not being ready to launch CARM. They're still not ready.
C'est très intéressant ce que vous dites. D'ailleurs,
What you're saying is very interesting, and I'll have an open question for both of you as well. You heard the testimony, or rather the exchanges that we've had. I don't know if you were able to read past witness statements, or maybe you didn't have the time, but Is there anything that you'd like to rectify that you said in the past, in the spring? Anything you'd like to change that you said?
De corriger là, dans ce que vous avez entendu là, des fonctionnaires.
Anything to correct from what you heard from public servants?
Still have a completely different reality. What they're reflecting is not what we're feeling, and that is for the reason we keep asking for a third party. I think at this point, we're having too much of a he said, she said moment that we need somebody to come in and actually roll up the sleeves and find out what's going on.
Monsieur Weber, autre chose à ajouter sur...
Mr. Weber, anything to add on the dog that ate your homework?
To be delayed once again until the people who are working at the border, who are going to be able to assist these importers, have an idea how to use the system. We can't replicate what happened with the Arrivecan.
Qu'est-ce qui sera un délai à votre...
In your opinion, what would be an appropriate timeline? And another related question, is it still useful to say 6 months if nothing changes, if there's not more training and consultations?
When exactly, as you say, there's no consultation and the training is really not happening in any meaningful way now.
Mr. Cannings, for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to just follow on those questions, because I think that's what we're hearing right now is, we heard a rosy picture from CBSA, and now we're hearing that nothing much has changed, even though we had that, things were put off. If everything was working in terms of if the training was there, the training was happening, how long, do you have any idea how long that might take, sort of in the best case scenario?
Best case scenario and amount of time depends greatly on what the training is, whether or not our members have the ability to practice with the system. A PowerPoint presentation is really not useful when the system itself is using language they're not familiar with. This is a system that was developed for the Canada Revenue Agency that is using terminology that is not necessarily familiar to importers or our officers. So it is very confusing, and they're worried. They all lived through what happened during Arrivecan, and we became, IT consultants for large swaths of time during that pandemic, where it was our job was really a constant struggle to use systems that we really didn't know how to use to try to help travelers, in this case importers, to do that paperwork properly, which we were really not successful in doing in the most part.
So I imagine you would have a list of things you'd like CBSA to provide in terms of training, in terms of all that. I'm just trying to get us, if we say, okay, let's delay it another 3 months, 6 months, year, I can see why we wouldn't want to just put it off indefinitely. But if there can be something laid down, we want to accomplish this in the next 6 months, you would be ready to provide that to CBSA in terms of what your members need?
Yes, I think once we have the specifics of what it is that's being rolled out, and again, we don't really know that. We've not been consulted, but I know from the members that they really don't know what to be expecting 4 weeks from now. So there's a lot. Yeah.
Can I add a couple comments? I think that's such a great and reasonable framework. But again, I feel like we just need somebody to sit down between the two parties and maybe work on a reasonably agreed framework to get us there. The other thing I wouldn't mind sharing is I had the privilege of meeting with the Executive Acting Commissioner at U.S. Customs on Monday, who actually manages their trade program. And we talked about CARM. And one of the things we still struggle with, which they've also felt was interesting, that we are going big bang. Because for the reasons we're kind of laying out, it's just reasonable that we would be bringing people on in a just graduated way as we're all learning. And U.S. Customs still runs parallel systems to this day, even though we've been hearing from our Canadian counterparts that they've done the same thing. No, they haven't. They have a completely different approach. They've run parallel systems, and they still are maintaining legacy systems as they get everyone on to to the newer, more modernized processes. If that gives you any insight.
And just quickly, what are the incentives for people to get onto the new system rather than just say, I'm not going to learn a new system?
In the U.S. versus Canada?
Well, in general.
Okay, so in Canada, really, there isn't that much of an incentive. I think that's been part of it. It's the heavy-handed part. But I will say, I do agree with Mr. Galvin when he talked about there will be increased visibility. People will be able to see things online in one place. Those are great things. Some of the other processes are going to be automated that are paper-based today, but I think it's really important for everyone to know most of these things are already automated. There's just very few things that are paper-based, but even that will be beneficial, more beneficial than what we have today.
Time doesn't fly
Everybody.
sometimes. Well, I'd just like to maybe if you can expand on things that you were mentioning, things that I don't recognize. This is a lot of jargon new to me. EDI processes. What's
Yeah, so that's a great question. So on the portal itself, and this is kind of the curious things for us, for a lot of us that are wondering, Customs is trying to push us all into the portal and has been. The problem with the portal is you have to actually manually go in and do stuff. As with most of our processes together, sit in systems today where we're exchanging information electronically between importers, their service providers, and then they're pushing that forward, information electronically. So it's all been pretty seamless and electronic for decades. So some of their decisions to change things are actually breaking some of those pipes that we've been used to, and that's definitely a big challenge.
Okay, you have 9 seconds, so I think we
okay.
can leave
I'm
that.
done.
Mr. Baldinelli for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And given the testimony of the witnesses here this afternoon, kind of surprising and distressing to say the least. Just want to build on what Mr. Weber talked about when he described and advocated for the launch of CARM being delayed by about 6 months, and the notion of can't having this happen again. What happened to ArriveCAN should not happen in this situation again. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to propose a motion that I'd like to share with my committee members here, that the committee recommends that the federal government immediately suspend the implementation of CARM, currently scheduled for October 21st, 2024, until at least April 2025, and that the system only be brought into use after all concerned industry and union stakeholders can provide another update to the Standing Committee on International Trade that demonstrates their improved confidence and readiness for CARM implementation. And the Standing Committee on International Trade can complete its study on CARM and table a final report containing its observations and recommendations. And that's the motion I propose, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's Tremblay.
Puis-je proposer 2 amendements à la motion?
I'd like to suggest 2 amendments to the motion, if possible.
English and in French. Okay, could you read them?
Oui, je vais y aller lentement, c'est très court de toute façon.
Okay, I'll read them slowly. It's very short. At the end of the sentence, the first sentence, so before the semicolon, that the committee recommend that the government suspend, etc. At the end, that they prove that they are not able to, don't have the confidence in implementing CARM, and that they request that we're requesting documents before next spring. And at the very end of the motion, that they report to the House.
Si mes collègues conservateurs sont prêts à accepter ces propositions.
I'm going to suggest that we suspend for a few minutes so that we thoroughly understand the amendments from Monsieur Tremblay. So I will suspend for a few minutes, very few minutes, if you don't mind. Badaway.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to the clerk, is there any opportunity that we can have to actually invite also the Canadian Association of Custom Brokers? Oh, I'm sorry, the Canadian Society of Custom Brokers.
When? And so I think we need to kind of keep the witnesses all in the same time. So we'll add the custom brokers as well. And if anyone else has anyone else that we think is really pertinent to trying to bring this discussion to a direction.
Madame la Présidente, est-ce qu'on peut vous envoyer des noms par...
Madam Chair, can we send you names by email? Because just asking us on the spot is a little quick.
To me now, send them by email to the clerk. If you have a couple of suggestions of people that you think are pertinent to us dealing with this issue.
Is the intention
The key is trying to get it done on Wednesday because like the blackout period starts on the 4th, right?
We'll invite the witnesses that we can get for Wednesday. What we get, we get.
And so, how much time for?
So we think that a half an hour would be sufficient to deal with the motion. So that'll be the first half hour, and the other hour and a half would be some additional witnesses over and above what we possibly had today.
Can we flip that? Yeah, flip that. We'll hear from the witnesses, and then we'll do the last.
Dealing with this motion.
Yep.
All right, everybody's good with that? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all very